Hey, thank you. Greetings and welcome. We are live. Welcome back once again. I don't know what happened to Google Hangouts. It used to do the ting. It don't do the ting no more. And sometimes you don't even know it. You just see the little thing pop up and you know you live. Anyway, greetings and welcome back once again. This is the Moon Israel Solonomics 101 Left Project. So many things to think about. I want to shout out everybody who's tuning in, who tunes in after. Thank you for sharing and caring and all of that nice, great stuff. Um, yeah, what was I going to say? Today, we're going to get back into, we're going to take a little break from Mr. John Blackwell. Like I said, he was putting me to sleep, and sometimes you need something that's going to wake you back up and reinvigorate you in this journey of reading collectively and sharing. And so I had to throw a little something in there to kind of pep me up. I did have one sister who volunteered to read, so hopefully we'll be hearing from her. I will share the link going forward. It's kind of hard to pin me down, you know, but I'm gonna have to get back on a little bit of a schedule so that it just doesn't pop up on people. So what was I gonna say? Yeah. Oh, let me talk a little bit because sometimes I start like way on early and it does have to do with exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes we need morale boosters. And that is, you know, maybe you need things that goals, short-term goals that you can accomplish so that you can build yourself up. And this is happening to me right now, and I'll just speak a little bit about it before we get into the Left Project. And for those who are new to the Left Project, hold on. Oh, this crazy thing. Welcome. If you have any questions or comments, put it in the comment box, and then I'll hop over there and see it. But sometimes you need morale boosters. And so say you're doing something and it's not coming out right, or you're writing something, you try something that you can attain so that you could, because sometimes the mind is very crazy. You could be doing stuff good all along the time and you have a little low. And all of a sudden, oh, it's not working. This is not for me. Hey, Danera, how you doing? Welcome, welcome. We just getting started. And sometimes you'll be like, this is not for me. I can't do it anymore. And you get discouraged. Now, again, I was telling you guys of this two stories because this just happened. The hat for me was a morale booster because I was making some things. For those who don't know, I picked up back crocheting to even out my mind. And I was making some stuff and I'm like, I don't like how this thing is coming out. Because there's a thing. You can either go by pattern or you can go, and definitely we're going to go into the interesting account of Thomas Anderson tonight. So I'm not going to stay too long. This is life. I like to pull analogies. I say learn something from everything. So please learn something from everything. I'm just using needlework right now as my picture. Like picture this, right? And so I'm doing certain things and I'm learning different stitches. And I just said, okay, let me see what I can do. And I'm like, this ain't working. I don't like this. So I needed a small project, which was this hat. And definitely winter is coming. So hit me up if you need some winter stuff. And I said, I need some small project that's a little bit different to kind of boost my mother's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm not feeling myself right now as it relates to, you know, the progress that I was doing. You know, sometimes you bomb out. That's the thing. People have to understand. You don't always make a home run. Just because somebody had one hit song doesn't mean every single song Bob Marley song wasn't a hit. And we seem to think that people bust overnight, as they will say, or they just came, or there was an overnight sensation. No, there are many failures on the road to success. And that was on my mind as y'all may be seeing this is a word. Anytime you see the thing up here, that means I'm in work in action. I didn't mean this to be this because I'm not going by a pattern. And sometimes you have to freestyle, right? And so I was freestyling from my memory. And then when you look at it, you're like, this is not what I wanted to look like. And it depends if you're a free spirit, kind of like me. I'm like, well, I know what it does look like now. It's about to be a collar. But again, you have to have that fluidity, especially as you talk about growth in certain areas. Like certain things are not for compromising. But in certain areas, when it comes to creativity, you have to have the ability to laugh at yourself, acknowledge that you made a mistake, recalibrate and reimagine whatever you're doing can become. And that's just a life lesson. And one of my practices, because I do also do solonomics as well, is to see if I could pull out life lessons from everything that happens. I know it's wild, but after you begin to train your mind, then nothing is wasted, because life is an experience that we're supposed to learn and elevate from. So nothing is wasted if you train yourself to be able to learn something from everything. So that's my little 5-second Mamuna moment before I go into reading right now. For those who just joined us, you're welcome. You're welcome. We're gonna get started right now. Welcome back, Angel. Angel always keeps me on track. If I be getting sleepy, Angel just the most I just send her right in time to just bring the message, and that's what Malak means. It means a messenger, and she'll drop a message because she's been with the Left Project since day one, and so I always got to give her a shout out, as well as all those who caught up to it, what we've been doing, and really appreciate it. So at this point, if you're not familiar, if you scroll down, if this is one of your first live readings, you're going to see docsouth.unc in the box. You can read along or you can just listen to the conversation. I picked this, again, this is another morale booster for the Left Project because it's a shorter account. And again, we go through long accounts or short accounts. I really at first wanted to go through Oladu Equiano, which is always also on Doc South. So a lot of this stuff, you don't have to necessarily go out and buy the book. I like books, but because I like to mark up in the book so I can remember where I saw stuff at. But for the most part, I usually read from what everybody can read from. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to bust out this morale booster because Amuna been slipping for a little bit. I've been on vacay and we're going to bust this out so we can say, yes, we have another narrative in the can, so to speak. So I'm going to scan my screen. Interesting account of Thomas Anderson, a slave taken from his own lips. Again, we read accounts from male slaves, female slaves, children narratives, as well as slave masters like John Blackford, who just was like, really, he wasn't even getting into the juice of it. And after a while, I'm like, dude, I feel like you're accountant. But yeah, I need a little morale booster right now. So we're going to get in it. The following very interesting account of Thomas Anderson, a slave residing near the mouth of Guyandotte, Cabell County, Virginia, was taken down by J.P. Clark, who was intimately acquainted with him, preserving the peculiar dialect. Uncle Thomas Anderson's conversion and experience as given by himself, 12th month, the 24th, so December the 24th, 1854. Now in his 69th year, he is known as Uncle Tom, where he resides. Okay. I was born a slave in Hanover County, Virginia, and being very much exposed in my boyhood, no one taking any interest in my welfare. Again, and if you're new, I tend to comment on what it is that we're reading and try to put together all of it. So if you hear me stop and you be like, why don't you just keep reading this straight? This has been what we've been practicing just to kind of process what we're reading. So I think it's interesting. He just said, no one took an interest in my welfare. I became very wicked and remained so till I arrived at the age of 19. At which time I was singularly led to attend a religious meeting held by the Baptists, who was a very humble people at that time. When I was awakened to a sense of my condition from these words, dropped from a humble minister, the wicked have no hope beyond the grave, while the righteous have a hope beyond Jordan's cold stream. And after they have crossed Jordan, they have gone home to a G.O.D. of pity, to a G.O.D. of compassion, to a G.O.D. of sovereign mercy. End quote. These words took a deep hold on my wicked heart and break up the great deep in my soul. And this prepared me to seek such a friend. And after searching a long season of time, the friend of sinners appeared and filled my heart with love. He gave me peace of my soul and confidence of my mind. Then I could gladly tell this glorious Savior of mine, he says, this destroyed all early fear and prepared me to rest in hope. And then I could say, by sea or land, by day or night, the Lord is ever mine, end quote. 40 odd years I travel on in this way, and it now appears more precious than the first. And now I say, so he's talking about his conversion, what happened when he was a child. You know, he was out there for self, like a lot of children in the streets. And someone says something that touches the soul, like he says, it touches the soul. So if it is somebody who's bringing something that touches the human soul, even if they may be bringing along fallacies with it, people are going to be inclined to lean towards, because in this case, it's the first time he's ever hearing something that moved him in this direction. But he says, come all who would live quiet here. This gracious Savior try, he says, lay down your arms and earthly care, and you will find a Savior nigh. Now, I would be glad for all the world to know that after I was awakened, as I have described, that love in place of fear filled my heart. maybe I better say here that very often when I'm going on in wickedness, something tell me this wickedness and I feel very bad. So he had a conscience. At that time, I did not know that it was the good spirit talking within me or with me. Yet I know all the time that I was doing wrong because I feel guilty, and that made me afraid. But when I give all to serve the Lord, he says, he promised he helped whenever I need him. And soon after, he tried my faith very strong. So far, this seems like it's going in a religious tone. He's not really speaking much about the slave master or the experience, but we're going to keep reading. Here goes the master right now. My master who owned me at the time had no knowledge of God or godliness, it says. Suppose my religion was all a fancy. For those who keep saying all of the slave masters was forced into whatever, we keep reading over and over again. In his case, a lot of these slave masters wasn't religious themselves. And so they wouldn't even force their own slaves to go to church because they themselves ain't go. But I'm going to continue. Suppose my religion was all a fancy and said he could and whip it out of me. So this is a man saying that the slave master said he'll whip his religion out of him, okay, instead of into him. He took me up and tied me and scourged me until feeling of flesh was almost gone. At length I fall before him and lift up my cries to heaven and ask my great creator, what have I done? He says, my master cursed me and said, will you preach to me? But I now feel glad that I could suffer patiently for my new master. And my manner at the time take master's strength away. And before he left me, he untied me and left me off. But in about 3 hours, he come again and threatened me with fresh scourging. And though I was very weak from the beating I got, the Lord made me feel very strong. And this prepared me to answer, you have whipped out all fear, and I'm not afraid of you no more. End quote. You can take a gun, he says, and shoot him. I ain't gonna say me, I'm gonna say, because he says shoot him or kill him as you please, and all for nothing. And that is all you can do, for I know I have a life you cannot touch. Oh, that's called being indignant. The slave master is upset about that. Let me close some of this stuff here. This is the children's stuff right here. All right, let me continue. Sorry. Where are we? So he says, you can take a gun and shoot. He says, you can do as you please, but you can't touch my life. And the fear of you will not keep me from doing anything my new master tells me to do. And if he let you take his poor bruised body of flesh, I feel it ain't worth much, he says. And I feel strength to say something like this. Thy will, O God, be done and not mine. After this, my old master was conquered and never whipped me again. Interesting, huh? And left me in the hands of Jehovah, he says. This give me confidence to talk to the white or the black folks and to tell what the Lord had done for my poor soul. After this, a great many come to me about religion, some good, some bad folks. For it was generally known that a great change had come over time. But I feel so poor. Sometimes I have to wait for the spirit to warm my heart. When I sometimes talk very free about the love of God, and then they listen very attentively. About this time, the church requested me to join them, but I could not do without my master's consent, as it is against the laws of Virginia for slaves to join without consent of their masters. Very, very, again, this is Virginia. Again, and if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to share. Welcome, Kylie. Greetings, everybody. Yeah, Uncle Tom, they say his name is, but there was a lot of men named Tom. So, his name is Thomas. There's a lot of men named Tom. But I think it's interesting. He's giving us a look into, each culture, each state had its own culture as it relates, and they had their own laws as it related to slavery. And so he's telling us about Virginia laws, saying that it was illegal in Virginia to join a church without your slave master's consent. Interesting. He says, and when I asked him, he wrote these words, that the church should judge for herself, for he was not a judge. But if they thought best to receive him, he had no objections. And for his part, he thought if there was a Christian in the world, Tom was one. Upon this, I joined the church. So Tom was like, yo, you could do whatever you want. You could, but you're not going to take away my faith. And then the slave master, according to Tom's account, gave up trying. And he was like, all right, whatever, do your thing. So this wasn't something that the slave master forced him to do. This was of their own volition. And you have to remember, too, going to church for slaves was an out. Going to church was an opportunity, if you were allowed to, in certain situations, to have like a portion of your day off. And you still see it amongst the quote unquote black church today, where there's this whole big dinner, there's this whole event as it relates to church, because it meant that one day where you had a little reprieve, depending on who your slave master was. Let me continue. My master was an unbeliever, or tried hard to be, and he continued a wicked man to the last moment of his life. He was quite intemperate. Before my master died, he lost 5 children, 2 sons, 3 daughters. And when they were confined to their sick beds, he sometimes felt very tender and would often recommend me to talk or pray with them. Oh gosh, this is giving me a flashback of Henry Box Brown. But let me not go there. Let me continue, Muna. As I think best. A few days before my master died, I visited his bedside. I asked him how was the state of his mind. He answered, some say there is no hereafter. I asked him what he say for himself. His answer short and crabbed, I don't know. And these were the last words he ever spoke, and his countenance looked vicious when he dying. But throughout a long life we lived together, I often had to suffer a great deal that was wrong or put up with it. Sometime after I joined the church, I sometimes feel that I would have to preach the gospel. This was a great trial to me, feeling I poor slave, and at the time did not know one letter. But one day when alone, my heavenly Father, very plain to me, thy works now begins in my vineyard. Go out upon the highways and cry aloud. But I excuse myself, saying, I don't know what to cry. And the LRD say, I put in your heart and in your mouth what to say. Fear not, for I will be with you. So he's recounting something similar to Moshe conversation, or Moses. And bring thee off conqueror and more than conqueror. And about this time, when in my bed, I was often attended with visions, with views of congregations sitting to hear the word. For a long time I cried, unworthy to undertake the task. But God at length prepared, and I promised to do the best I could. And God prepared me to this day. And when it come, I do the best I can. I don't remember if I read the preface. So after this, I'll go back and see. Wait, hold on. Give me 1 second. Let me go back and see if I read the preface. Oh, there was none. There wasn't any that we usually have. Okay, I thought I was bugging out. All right, let's continue. I was 23 years old when I did not know a letter. After that, I managed for 2 months to go 2 nights in a week to see a black maid who could spell a little. And she instructed me to spell in 3 syllables. And that was all the learning I got from human. After that, my heavenly master took me in hand and nursed me and learned me to read the Bible to good understanding. He first gave me faith, then he revealed to me. But most other books I have tried to read in a mystery to me. From the time of my conversion to this moment, I have never doubted the grace of God, for I have found all doubting comes from a wicked heart. I do feel while I'm relating this to you that I have great cause to bless the LRD, for he has nursed me through all journeying of my life and has been my comforter in distress. When trouble like a gloomy cloud has overshadowed me by the loss of 3 of my children, being taken from my bosom and soul and taken south. But here I got some consolation, reflect upon Joseph being sold into Egypt like Jacob. I was cast down in heart. Still I wait and believe in the LORD. I pray, I lift up my eyes that God might restore them again. But if not, to meet again on this earth, that we may joyfully meet on that shore where parting, sighing, and selling will be no more. So he's talking about he didn't have therapy, and this was his coping mechanism, his belief system, his faith-based. He used to the best of his ability what was given onto him, because when he went into these Christian churches, most of this information being disseminated by Europeans, this is what he used and then put his own spin, as many people did, to survive. And a lot of us today, retrospectively, we have a lot to say without first understanding what function it served. And as we begin to come out and begin to learn and edify ourselves, you know, we put down the things that we know today in this space and time are incorrect, but don't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's just Amuna speaking, but I'll continue. They were sold 11 years ago, and I have never heard from them since. My wife has, wow, 11 years. My wife has had me 21. What? Let me rewind. My wife has had by me 21 children. Oh, his wife was a breeder. 7 dead, 3 sold, and 11 about this country. My wife is good. 21. She was impregnated 21 times. Come on now. Come on. My wife is good, kind-hearted woman, but I sometimes fear she is too much like poor Martha was, careful and troubled about many things, and has not so fully chosen that good part which Mary did, that should never be taken from her. I have 3 children that are a great comfort to me in my old age. Edmund, Isaac, and Henry have chosen their father's footsteps to seek a city of sight. Edmund preaches the gospel and has often rejoiced my heart to hear him explain the mysteries of the gospel of J. Christ, he says. And again, that's another elevation, and you don't usually hear me say, but I will just, he put J-E-S-U-S, Christ. G-O-D is often tongue and utterance, mouth and wisdom. I wish you could hear him. All my children, as far as I know, have sustained good moral character. Edmund has learned to read the Bible. He saved a little money and laid it to buy a Bible, lacked a little, and that I make up. And it's interesting, even you see like a Martin Luther King, you see this, you see his father was a pastor. So you see, he says 3 children, and he has pride in them because these are the 3 who chose. And I'm like, okay, they're all males. And then they chose to do what he did. And you see this a lot within the family that, oh, my daddy was a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor, my great grandfather. And then you see that lineage of the children coming and walking in that stead. Sorry. It says here, Brother Clark, my faith is firm and unshaken that all those who will rely upon Geodude for counsel and direction will never be confounded. Although it may often be our lot to meet with clouds while traveling along in this pilgrimage journey through life. And keep in mind, he's talking all of this in the beginning. And what was it? It's the slavery didn't end till quote unquote end. This is 1854. So 65, in 9 years, slavery is supposed to end. And so I don't know how old he is I don't remember how old he was now in the 69th year. So he's talking about what happened retroactive, because he's talking about, so this would have been well into while he was still in slavery. He said he was 23. All right, so I'm gonna continue. Sometime I gotta line it up for myself. You know, this is the first time I'm actually reading this account. It says, Brother Clark, my faith is firm and unshaken that all those who rely upon God for counsel and direction will never be confounded. Although it may often be our lot to meet with clouds while traveling in this pilgrimage journey through life, yet he will ever be a wall of defense and will make a way for our escape through all our besetting troubles here, and will bring us off conquerors and more than conquerors over death, hell, and the grave. Page 7. And by the way, we're going to finish this today. That's why this is one of the reasons why I picked this one, so that we can at least get in a full narrative. And again, he said he couldn't read or write. He was self-taught to read the Bible. And so now this makes sense why he's narrating his story. Page 7. But we must put the old man entirely off with all his deeds, if we ever expect to put the new man on. And when this is done, it prepares us to suffer with him. And when done, all of our troubles and toils here, we shall reign with him forever and forever. So again, he's quoting out of a lot of New Testament conversation, if you're familiar with the text. He says, farewell, Brother Clark, for I feel the time has come that we must part. And if we never meet again on this footstool, I pray, G-O-D, we may meet with the ransom of all generations, world without end. And then he says, amen. And then I guess this is the note. It says, I became acquainted with the subject of foregoing narrative in the year 1848, and have met with him frequently since that time. At the date of this narrative, I was on business in his neighborhood, and Tom, learning where I stopped, called at the hotel to see me. And as on the former occasions, I became very much interested when a thought came over my mind that a history from himself would be interesting. Again, we think that our story is not interesting, and we cannot share it, and someone cannot learn. But again, someone else saw the value in Thomas's story, and he took it upon himself to help him write this narrative. It goes on to say, when I asked him if he had any objections to my writing it down, he assured me he had none, and added that he had often thought it could be the means of doing good. He would be glad for all the world to know what the LORD had done for his poor soul. I then took it down in his own language, which is very nearly verbatim. The last account I took down for recollection a few hours after he related it to me, circumstances preventing his being present. And if not verbatim, it is substantially correct. I had no idea when writing either of them that they would ever be published, but many of my friends becoming deeply interested with the account, as well as myself, has encouraged it's being printed, and we are encouraged to read it. Nothing happens by accident. Much might be added to the interesting account already given. In fact, it has seldom fallen to my lot to meet with those more interesting, more especially when I take into view his limited opportunity of acquiring information, he being a slave. So, wow, I can't believe a slave is talking like this. I can't, he's all, compared with mankind in general. And although he is what would be considered a poor reader and cannot write at all, yet I think there are but a very few who particularly understand the scriptures better, or that are better versed in them. And I have thought in giving this narrative circulation, some might meet with it, who also may have had but a very limited opportunity to acquire knowledge. And these, I thought, might meet with encouragement and feel they too are equally the objects of divine regard with those who may be considered the more highly favored. And I also feel that there's a deep lesson couched in it to all classes and conditions in life. As I am not a member of any religious society, I suppose no one would charge me with having sectarian notions in view. But the little narrative being so original and seeming to savor so much of what I conceive to be the true spirit of, quote, Christianity, he says, he doesn't have quotes, of Christianity, I have consented to its publication, J.P. Clark. So I guess this is the second half that he narrated from his mind. If anybody has any questions, or Kylie, I don't know. He's, I know this sometimes, but not all of the men, because Henry Box Brown went into some details. But some of the men, they just really skim over it. Some of the feminine narratives, they go deep into it. I don't know. Sometimes it was incentives from what I've read concerning breeding thus far. The incentive from the master for the woman to breed would be that if after a certain amount of children, she could get her freedom, her labors would be decreased. And so there was incentive to breed. And so just by the sheer numbers alone, to me, it indicates that something else was going on there. And a lot of times, and of course, because the womb cannot sustain that level, you see a lot of children will come out, either they pass shortly after being born, some are stillborn. And once again, as you see them being sold away, you see that the master was using them for monetary gain. By this time, it's illegal to import, quote unquote, slaves, or they were still legally importing. And they started with the breeding, because this is the latter part, it's almost finished. So they were breeding so that they can get more money and things. And it says sold down south. And if we know that there was 2 migrations, forced migrations. The first one was to come to this country. The second one was, like he said, 3 of his children were sold down south. This is what, as we read other narratives, Charles Ball, Lewis Hughes, they spoke about this when they depleted the soil from the tobacco from the other planters, and all the soil was depleted because they were just greedy and just sucking out all the nutrients and not returning the crops. They were not doing it in a holistic way. So they began to move down south, Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, deep in the south. And so many people feared being sold deeper south from their family a second time. And so according to his testimony, this is what happened to his 3 children. Just by saying they were sold down south, we understand that they were sold onto these cotton plantations more often than not, because that's who's down there. So it says, and and we read in other places where the slave master would say they would threaten you. They would threaten you, they would threaten you with beating, they would threaten you with chastisement, or they would threaten you to say, I'll sell you down south, boy. And you know that when you get sold down south, you ain't never coming back. So that's the concept. That would be the thought, and that would be the deterrent from doing whatever it is that you wanted to do. But we're gonna go into page 8 here. It says the following communication from Uncle Tom Anderson was taken down by J.P. Clark some weeks after at another time. Of late, I have often had presented to my mind a large field of labor, and there has also been presented in the visions of light a great many unfaithful laborers who are going about trying to establish their own righteousness instead of the righteousness of God, who are the blind leaders of the blind, and who be to these except they repent. And I have thought these words will apply. Woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites, for you are graves that appear not, and the men that walk over them are not aware of them. And so long as this spirit was the rule, so long the true church will remain in the wilderness, and his servants will have to suffer. And once again, he's recounting, but the person, this JP person, is astonished at the fact that he's able to, Uncle Tom is able to narrate biblical text with being a poor reader. It says and that's not the first time we hear about people not being able to read anything except the Bible. Very interesting. It says, being as I am confined to a small field of labor in God's vineyard, I know but very little of what is going on in the world, as I have no means of informing myself, only as I catch a little here and there. Takoya. And then judging from that and what comes with my own knowledge, I have thought I could come out of pretty correct conclusion how the matter stands. For in the first place, I hear the subject of North and South talked a good deal about, because again, civil war, is brewing. It's a division in the country. I also hear it discussed in the pulpit by the professed ministers of the gospel. And of late, it has taken a deep hold on my mind. And as some of the well-disposed citizens of this neighborhood have been so kind as to contribute a piece of land and building a meeting house and placing it under my charge, in which I often meet with my colored and white brethren and sisters. So this dude, this dude, Uncle Thomas, he is having it looks like a mixed church. He says, my colored white brethren, feeling I humbly trust the great responsibility of such a charge. And on one occasion, not long since, I felt that God required it of me, there being some of the leading white men of the place present, to speak upon the question of North and South. And this text presents as being applicable: a house divided against itself cannot stand. And although I was led to communicate very close truths, they bear it well. And before I got through, an eminent lawyer shouted. A most solemn feeling was felt over the meeting. In the course of my discourse, I told him I did not think more of one party on account of the mere name they bear than of the other. But I did believe it was a dangerous subject for honest and well-disposed Christians to enter into, the spirit of which I had discovered leads to strife and great confusion. Instead of begetting love, it has begotten hatred. And when this feeling is indulged in both parties, in my opinion, in the side of God, is as bad as the other. And you see this conversation happening today. Those people within the government and society understood that if you get a hold of the pastors, because they understood that, quote, black people, melanated people, seem to listen to their spiritual, quote, authorities. And they did it to this day. That's why you saw, what's his name? Donald Trump with the meeting of all these black pastors, because they know that if you feed the message through them and they put it to their congregation, more often than not, you're going to get a better response than trying to approach the people themselves. And we saw this throughout the South in different narratives where they would go. So these Europeans now who want a conversation to be had on the North and the South, they're in the congregation wanting to have this conversation. And according to Thomas, he's like, yo, I'm not really feeling that conversation. It's going to cause more harm than good. He said, I strongly urge them to have no fellowship with such a spirit. And although it was great cross to me to warn them to beware of some of their leading men in the church, and told them so, and asked if they could bear the whole counsel of God, and they said, yes, Tom, the whole counsel. And I then pointed out to them the danger and told them that if they lack wisdom, ask it of God and not of man, and that if they asked in faith, believing, they would never be deceived. And I further told them the reason why I believe so. And the reason many were deceived was because they was not honest to themselves. Okay, like I said, learn something for anything. And that right there, I'm gonna have to post this one. He's because the reason many are deceived is because they're not honest with themselves, and that's deep and that's true. We see today that, and it has been on record, that when people sign up for religious organizations and they enter into a nonprofit status and comply with certain paperwork in order to be able to get non-taxed income, they have to commit to certain things. This is the compromise in this space and time. This is not what was happening, but in today's time, that is what is happening. There's a level of muzzle on the teachers and on the speakers. And so here we see Uncle Tom saying, hey, you handle the whole truth, basically? And they were like, yeah. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna give it to you. That's not a lot of what you're seeing today, especially in these mega churches and in these different places. The people are not getting the fullness of the truth, and that's by design. He goes on to say on page 10, let me make sure anybody doesn't have any. Okay. He said, I think God has begun a good work in the part of his heritage, in which he has and continues to sow the seed of his kingdom. And while I'm aware there is much that falls on the stony ground, I feel encouraged in the belief that there has some fallen on good ground. And I often pray God to prosper it, that it might find forth fruit to his praise, and that the stony heart of men may be subdued. The LORD has lately been showing a small field of labor, which I believe it is his will I should enter into. And although the time it is to be accomplished and the manner in which it is to be brought about is yet hid from me, although not long since there came a delegation from the very place inviting me to go and to see them on gospel mission. So basically, he's a preacher. You understand? He went from wicked to studying, and then he felt like he was called to share the message that he's sharing. I told him that a mere call from a man was not sufficient to set off on such a work. And I also told him that if the LORD had put in their hearts to call me to their neighborhood, he would probably renew it. When one of them, a very humble-hearted Christian, said that he felt before leaving home that it was the will of God. I then informed them how I had felt about it. And I further told them that 40 odd years had now passed away since the LRD first called me to this work. And when I excused myself saying, I poor slave, unquote, and so on, he promised he help whenever I need him. And his promises are yea and amen forever. And at that time, I did not know A from B. Because remember, he said he went to the lady who could read a little bit and she helped him a little bit. I know but very little now, except that LORD teach me, neither do I desire to. For God has said he would teach his people himself. So that if a man lack wisdom, he should ask it of God and not of man whose breath is in his nostrils. And we only have 2 more pages to go. So yay us, once we finish this interesting account of Thomas. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put it in the box. And it goes on to say, for wherein is he to be accounted of? And we further read in the holy book, curses the man that trusts in man and maketh flesh his arm. And LRD never called a man to do a piece of work and then leave him in the dark and not tell him how to do that work. And he never promises, but he performs. But man often lays up his fellow many heavy burdens, grievous to be borne, and will not touch them with one of his fingers. Give me 1 second, please. I'll be right back. 1 second. We're almost done. All right. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience. Let's get back to it. When you hear babies quiet, you got to go check real quick. So I'm glad I did. Let me continue. He says here, where was I? Okay. And the LRD lay out a little work not long since for me to do in Ohio and about 12 miles distant. And though I did not see at first how it was to be done, I wait patiently his time to remove the mountains out of my way. And when he did remove it, he made the path of duty very plain, and all the opposition was removed out of the way. And then I performed a little labor to the peace of my soul, and I trust to the glory of God. I am sorry to say it, but it is no less true that the greatest opposition I meet with the opposing spirit of those who profess the Christian religion. So he's saying it's just like today people say the greatest opposition they meet is with other, quote, black people. He's saying the same thing. How many years ago? He's like, the greatest opposition he met is with the people who are supposed to be like unto him. It says, and poor things, they not only deceive themselves, but one another. And many of these are very shy of me. And I think I should say the truth if I should say they are afraid of me, or are afraid to meet the truth, for they know Tom does not deal in cunningly devised fable, for his heavenly master has always learned him to tell the truth, and not daub with untempered mortar, and cry peace where there is no peace to be felt. So Tom is saying, man, he was fire. He blow fire on you, and he ain't trying to water it down. A very great professor came to me not long since, and he talked a great deal before I say much. And when I began to talk, I asked, could he bear the truth? For I told him when I talked, I could not dodge around it. And if I could, I dare not. He is a man of great learning and a professed minister of the gospel. I had heard him preach, and some persons asked me what I think of it and how I like it. Well, I tell them that I thought of it, what I thought of him, and that make him come. Well, he agreed he could bear the truth and had no wish to hear anything else or to dodge around it. There had been a great revival in his church, and it was reported that a great many had been hopefully converted. And he heard I remarked that I was afraid most of them were converts of the devil. I can't. He says, under the cover of sheep's clothing, and this man think I deny it. I then told him what I did say, which was in substance what he had charged me with saying. I then told him I had talked with many of them, hoping what I heard was true, but was surprised to find they did not know the right hand from the left. I tried to show them the true condition, but most of them were so whole and so wise in their own imagination that I could do nothing for them. I then talked very plain to him and tell him the great responsibility resting upon such as him. And I am certain he felt what I told him was the truth, but he was too proud to own it. Although he was made to tremble, I have thought if there had been others present, he would not have listened as long as he did. But LRD gave him a great thrashing, and I hope it may do him good. And that's the end. That was our little Left Project morale booster there. That was a short account, 12 pages, interesting account of Thomas Anderson, a slave taken from his own lips, an enslaved individual from Cabell County, Virginia. And we just read his story. I think he was very much more interested in sharing his narrative as it related to his conversion or his awakening, as he put it, and feeling like or having a call to do something greater than being a slave. And so this is what he shared mostly in his conversation. And again, there's something to be learned from everything. There's bits and morsels that one could glean from what he was saying, especially as it relates to speaking truth to power, which we see that early on he did. He spoke truth to power when he told his slave master, hey, Amuna, I like this one, but will you ever do one about an African that stood up and fought back and went hard? I'm going to do Olado Equiano. We're going to do, it's like some of these, Kyle, some of these are long, some are short. I'm going to do, some of them I read before, some of them I didn't. And so because there's so much, and a lot of us only know about, some of us only know about those ones who, what's the word I'm looking for here? Those ones who stand out to the forefront. But someone such as Thomas Anderson, we would never have heard of more often than not. And so because there's so much material, we're just going through. We did do one, as a matter of fact, Kyle. We did Cain. Tish says, as one of the been leaving for quite a few readings, I can say that often these narratives include our ancestors fighting back. And correct. There is what's the one that we did? It was The Adventures of Venture Smith. Check that one out, because he speaks about the story, The Adventures of Venture Smith. It's in the timeline. He speaks about the story starting off with him in Africa, and that his father was a prince, and how the whole thing went down, how he actually got captured and came over here and began to hide out his time and work to buy his freedom and things of that nature. So we've done that. The stories pick up at so many different points, depending on where the author chooses to pick it up, if you can understand what I'm saying. So what I gleaned from this story is that even though he was not born on the continent, which by this time many people were born in America, you understand, because by 1800s there's no more importation of slaves. So it really depends. If you're looking at the early 1600s, you're going to get a different narrative. If you're looking at the 1700s, you're going to get a different narrative. If you're looking at the 1800s, you're going to get a different narrative, because different things were happening historically that will change the perspective of the slave or the enslaved individual or the person kidnapped. So at this point that we just read, this is almost at the end. This is going to the latter part. Like I said, what, the early 1800s, there's no more importation. It's the abolition of the slave trade. And so we see him fighting back in his own way, and using what he had accessible to make a difference. And basically he fought back because he said, hey, slave master, I don't fear you. And once he let the slave master know, he for me, my takeaway from this, and feel free to share your takeaway. My takeaway from this is he spoke truth to power, and he came to the point where I'm not going to compromise anymore. So do what you will, is what he said. And when that fear was no longer there, and he said that he put his fear in a higher power, the slave master was disempowered. And so that lesson for me is something to take away from that. You have to reach that space within your own soul. No one could pump you up to get there. That's something that each and every individual have to know what they're standing for. Because when you don't know what you're standing for, the slightest thing that pushes you, you're going to retreat. And so, like I said, there's not everything. I can't change the narratives to say, some things I'll be like, I just have to accept them for what they are, because this is their authentic voice in the space and time that they were. And I just give thanks that we actually have the opportunity to read some of their experiences. Another thing that I took away, and feel free to share, was he just said 2 lines about his childhood. It looks like he really wanted to get to the latter part of his life, but he was like, nobody really cared about me. In this day and time, a lot of children turn to wickedness because the attention that they need, the growing that they need, the nourishment that they need is not there. And so they look for it in other ways, in other forms, in other alternatives. And then we say, oh man, bad children, bad generation. Okay, but children don't raise themselves. Children don't raise themselves. And so I know it was a short one. We might read a few more short ones just to continue to boost the morale a little bit, get back on track. And definitely we're going to check out Alado Equiano, because I think he starts his narrative off on the continent. And then he goes through him being free, because the Zong massacre, and I spoke about this here somewhere else, the Zong massacre, there was Bell is the name of the movie, and give thanks, because it was actually a Left Project watcher who told me about the movie that centered around the Zong massacre and the case in England. And Olado Equiano, I think, is interwoven into that conversation. So definitely, I haven't read this in its entirety, so we're going to read it together. So we probably read another short one. Sometime I like to stir it up. We might get a slave master capturers account. I have a few of those saved on my computer. We might want to get some of those. I want all kind of perspectives. And so this is why we probably get one of those perspectives before we go to Olado Equiano. If you have any suggestions, let us know. We'll put it on the reading list. And if you like to read, I know y'all like listening. Hey, peace, Kingston, how you doing? If you like to read, if you don't like to read, we still want to hear you. So, we could go slow, we could go fast. It depends on your tempo. It's all good. If you want to contribute your voice, point blank, please just hit me up, let me know. And when we come back again, we could definitely read, and I'll give you the link to come in on the side that I am, so that everyone can hear your voice as well. And we can go forward from there. So with that said, that was good. That was good. I feel a little better now. I'm gonna find. I had some saved, and I'm gonna find them, and then we're gonna come back, and I definitely post on Facebook, and you see the live alert here on YouTube that we go live, and we're gonna do that. So you finally caught us live, King Summer. We just finished. We just finished. It was a short account, 12 pages. Interesting account of Thomas Anderson. He's basically speaking about his life, his calling into the ministry, and his experiences. It was short, but again, there's some things to be learned from what it is that he shared. So sorry about that. I'm gonna try to get. Yeah, I know, Kingston, you missed us, but you can listen it on the replay. You can listen it on the replay. It's all good. You know, it's hard to get me pinned down, man. It's hard to get me pinned down because the babies be making a whole lot of noise, and it depends on the day. But if we had more readers, I could just open it up, and I won't always have to be on camera and being the person that's reading. So again, if we could get a schedule, we'll have to get more commitment to readers, and then we definitely could be more consistent with our bringing forth. But until then, we're gonna have to continue to do what we do. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in once again. Please, if you can, support the works. We have 2-3 books out, another one coming soon. Solonomics 101 is coming soon, as well as the course, the crochet works. If you're cold, if you live in cold regions, you need hats, you need scarves, just hit me up. I definitely help you out in those areas. And we're just doing things to continue to keep the work going. So with that said, everybody have a great night, and thank you for tuning in. All right, one.